Well, Germanian, ladies and gentlemen, I am deeply conscious of the honour which you have done me in inviting me to talk to you this evening anent the Scots tongue the day, and most grateful to Frances for her support on this occasion. To be involved in the Robert Burns Bicentenary Masterclass series of lectures represents a formidable challenge to me, inasmuch as all the speakers, including Frances, are accomplished professionals in their own fields. Me, I'm just an amateur. But from whatever the spark has kindled my love from the Scots language has come, it burns bricht, and its low has gi'en me smedum to hod for it for many a year with a Scotsune ettle, to make more easily available the sound of Scots in language, literature, music and song on cassette, or, bitten into Scots, to make more easily patent the sooner Scots in lead, literature, music and sang on kisty. Let me tell you something about Scotsune, as it is through this medium that so much has been attempted and realised in support of the Scots tongue. Scotsune consists of twa folk, Alan Ramsay, native of Ayr, and myself, a fifer, and native of the Auld Grey Tune of Dunfermline. Alan is the technical advisor to Scotsune, and his skill in recording and editing in both sound and video, along with the design of all the covers and packaging of our 132 audio cassette releases, represents a great and generous involvement of his time and talent. I am the sorcerer's apprentice, and am responsible for much of the conceptual aspects of our archive, but am I beholden to Alan for the actual realisation of our ploys. We set out on our odyssey in 1973, when we began recording the work of Robert Ferguson, so that on Burns Day 1974 we were able to release our first Kisty as a tribute to that macker who had such an important influence on Burns himself. The Irvine Burns Club has a special place in my thoughts, as in 1972, in Jim Wales's bank, I held in my hands the Kilmarnock edition of Burns's poems, and I still recall that moment when I opened it to read that they were chiefly in the Scottish dialect. Not long before that, I had been involved in the founding of the Lowland Society, now the Scots Language Society, and this led on to the forging of links with this club through the good offices of the late Andrew Hood. The Ramsay Head Press to publish his shortened word book in December 1977. Much of this work and concept is to be found in both the concise English-Scots dictionary, which bears the dedication for William Graham, whose generous gift of manuscript material made this dictionary possible, and the Scots School Dictionary, Scots English and English Scots, published only some weeks ago by Chambers. Bill's knowledge and appreciation of what Scotsman was trying to do was always apparent, and I learned much from him. He was a braw poet himself, well known in this place, and winner in 1993 of the Irvine International Poetry Competition Award for poems in both the Scots and English sections. Here he reads his own tribute to Burns, which rings with all the reality of a cultivator of the soil. Aye, the glor often stuck to his bits. Here is Moss Giel from our Twa Three Sangs and Stories.
Moss Giel, Moss Giel, Moss Giel, the very name so slick the wind with a full cry o' Merland bird at the hour come out. But it's no the oory cry o' a bird, and it's no the aimless sang o' the wind gravels the heart at the mind and out. It's the sex o' a man on yon bare hill top, horns thick, back bent, heed to the blast, riving the slaggy guts o' the sail, sour with the fug and the thinking out. The thinking out, and the ruin out, the clinty yard and the pluing out, the stone o' the heart the only sang, the only hope, the lang day done. And a man had a spence but angle left, a haunted houd on die door the nacht. Dark weary, cell weary, oh, he's lain deep in a lang green mantle dream.
You are all familiar with Ayrshire Scots, so well captured in Burns' own poetry and song, but I would like you to hear other dialects this evening, and I submit that the richness of accent enhances the quality and variety of our linguistic heritage today. Here are swatches of prose in the dialects of the East Neuk of Fife and 2 districts of Lanarkshire. First, Mary Kermack, born in the East Neuk, recalls something of our early days at harvest time.
After market day it was harvest time, then totty time, and my mother recruited a creel. That was the basket she had the totties in. She covered it with silk cut to fit and shoed that over a silk needle, and the creel would last longer. I hear a silk needle yet, and a rug hoop as well. In winter time, my father would put on a gathering coal on the fire, and it burned all night, and the kettle would be singing ready to make the parts in the morning. The fire on all night was handy if you had a host. My mother would put some sugar and butter in an old iron spoon and hold it over the fire till it was toffee. Aye, you never tasted toffee like that. In threshing time, we would hear the big mill coming rocking along the road. What did we like about threshing time? The workers got beer and baps, and we got new calf for our takes. What a grand rishel and balmy smell has a new calf take. We wouldn't be long and sleeping, and guys were to walk in the morning.
And if we travel west to the Clyde Valley, I can let you hear the poet and playwright Robert McClellan reading a swatch from one of his Linmill stories, 4 of which I recorded at his home in High Corrie in Arran in 1979. Here he speaks about a fatal Sabbath morning. He's a lovely Scots soft voice, and his Scots is fluent and sicker.
But that Sabbath morning I kent what I was in for, and dreaded the thought of who I would look. So after breakfast I slip it out, and get it all down across the Clyde Road and through the wall yet, and into a thick pair to the wall orchard among some plum trees, where I kent there were tall busses with sulphur grousets. And at the front of my Guernsey up, I was filling it with the grousets when I heard my Minnie's call. I didn't know what I could hear. Her call came nearer, so I slipped it forward down the orchard to the bank of in the Clyde and hid at the back of some hazels. It was a mistake, for there was a wee spring wall near at hand, with colder water than the wall further up, that was used for ordner. And when Minnie Wells came to this wall with a milk can for water to drink, and she had tramped a wee pad through the lang grass. She came down this pad now, calling my name, and I could hear that she was growing Guyanic. Still I wouldn't have let on I heard her, and I know I heard my father calling Tay, and he seemed at one altogether. I kent again I didn't give us a lot out of a licking by the ordner. I gave for it to my Minnie with the sulphur grousets. I kent she was fond of them. I was spooning you some grousets, Minnie. She gave me a queer look as if she kent I was laying, and took me by the hand. Your hair's late for the kirk. Hurry.
Biding with the kirk, here is the story of Paul's shipwreck on Malta, but it sounds quite different when told in Scots as ours set in Lorimer's The New Testament in Scots. The reader is a douce Glasgow doctor who hails from the old village of East Kilbride of yesteryear.
When they had staged their hunger, they yoked to lichten on the ship, they casting their frocks of wheat our bird. When day brak, and Uncle Lond met the reed. But they saw a bay with a sandy shore, and they purposed to run the ship aground on it, if they could. So they cut it awa the anchors, and left them into the sea, and at the same time loused the tow rakes holding the steering ears. Syne they heaved the foresail, and looked the wind to drive the ship to the shore. But they had happened on a shoal, and when the ship drave in it, the bows stuck firm and fast to the sod, and the stern was shaken out to earth, with the doubt. The soldiers wait for killing the prisoners, for dread at only of them might soon law and escape. But the centurion was wishful to save Paul's life, and hindered them doing what they uttered. He gave orders that sickness could soon should wipe our bird first and matter the land. The lave was to follow on dales or other bits of the ship. In this way, the hair of them wan soft to land.
But the love of Scots is a personal thing, and just why it means so much to some and not to others is worth considering. Recently, a friend gave me a book of Our Mither Tongue by Ninian MacWhannell, and I would like to read you a poem from it. It is entitled The Verse Speaker. It's written by J.G. Horn and goes like this. Fair fa her grave sweet Scottish tongue and snaw white heed. I could for very joy, he sung, to hear again the Lallan lead. The canny, kindly sough of the thing, like waters wimpling through the ling. The beauty o' it lumped in my throat, and I her lilt had a tang in tilt that diddled me through and through. I could he kiss the woman's moo. Pair thowless kiff, she had me in the how o' her liff, and couldna help but win me. At her ilka word, a wild young bird was chirmin in me. What is there in these lines that gied me a shog and made me read the poem again with interest and gratitude? It's full of good Scots for share, and I wonder who J.G. Horn was. I submit it's the soon of the words that gets to ye. And this is why we mauna lose our linguistic heritage as Lowland Scots. It is our birthright. Despite the colonial nature of our formal educational system, Scots will no lie doon and dee. So let us consider George Bruce's poem, Arden Burial. In memoriam, Scots Tongue. It was hardly worth paying for a casket. The body was that peely-wally. Nae blood in't. Look it like a scrap of brown paper. Papyrus, maybe? Nae gran enough for that. But there were some grand mourners. The editor of the Scottish National Dictionary, head of the Department of Scot Lit, president of the Burns Federation, president of the Lallan Society, president of the Saltaire Society, all present in strict alphabetical order, and yinner twa ora Scot Nats. Syne cam a fuff o' wind and lifted it out of the bowlie and hine awa. A wee bird sang. Dew dreeped on the belled heads o' the old men stood glowering at the tim tomb. She's jink it again, the bitch, said the man with the spade. Yes. That was from Modern Scots Verse, edited by Alex Scott. It's a nice collection. And that poem has the suggestion of a day in 1974 when, marking the death of Robert Ferguson 200 years before, a wheen of folk stood by that headstone, raised o'er the grave of Robert Ferguson in Canongate Kirkyard by Robert Burns. This gives me the excuse to play to you one of my favourite poems. It was written by Robert Garriott and is entitled At Robert Ferguson's Grave. Here is the here is the poet reading it.
At Robert Ferguson's grave, October 1962. Canongate Kirkyard in the failing year is auld and grey. The wee rosiers are bare. 5 gulls lean white again the dirty air. Why are they here? There's naething for them here. Why are we here ourselves? We gather near the grave
Ferguson's mainly, quite a fair turret, respectful, ill at ease, we stare at death. There's an address, I canna hear. Well, we stand bareheaded in the har, mourning a man that gaed back till the pool, 200 year afore our time. The glare that haps his banes glowers back. Strang, present duel rugs at my heart. Lichtly this gin ye door. Here Robert Burns knelt and kissed the moor.
Spare. Let me quote Robin Lorimer, editor of his father's translation of the New Testament in Scots. He once said to me that the Scots language is safely stored up in our literature. And he's right. If we would only read this treasure trove and let it be taught in our schools, we would find that the vir of the language, with all its wonderful precision, would let us find our true voice again with the humanity and experience of life which has been recorded down the years in our own tongue, manner of speaking, and the thought to our ain folk. This is the intention of the Scots and Mackers series, to create an archive culled from the great Mackers of our 6th century literate heritage, from Middle Scots to modern. They're all there. Take a look at the list you have, or should have, in your hands. But it's not just what has been scrivet, it's what is being scrivet that matters. Let me give you 2 examples. The first is the winning poem written by an 11-year-old girl, Stacey O'Keefe, at Towerbank Primary School in Portobello this year. The poem was called Wha? Me? Write poetry? Wha? Me? Write poetry? Away I no be daft. That's a ploy for sissies. My friends would think me saft. And yet, I like to read what other folks hae written. A poem can tell your inmost thoughts. You wouldna like to speak them. Oh, me, write poetry? I wa no be daft. I'll just read on and on and on. The meisters o' the craft. This poem won her the Tom Scott Tassie, presented in memory of that poet. I was asked to be chooser, not judge, in this competition in place of Tom, who died last year. The poem also won the first prize in the junior section of the Scots Language Society annual poetry competition for 1996. The second is the response to a study of Robert Henderson's moral fable, The Paddo and the Mouse, by pupils at Grove Academy in Broughty Ferry. Their teacher had taken great care to explain the action and had invited them to illustrate the events either as a news item or as a crime report. You will see what happened in the second visual part of my programme. So there is a quickening, genuine interest in the Scots Lead today, as seen in the new dictionaries, the establishment of the Scots Language Resource Centre based in the A.K. Bell Library in Perth, active groups such as the Curran in Lothian and Colin Wilson's pioneering efforts to encourage spoken Scots are all evidence of a healthy concern. To celebrate 25 years publication of the Lallans magazine, the Scots Language Society made a selection which was published by the Mercat Press under the title of Macket New in 1995. But perhaps the most significant thing to happen in the field of Scottish education this century, as regards the Scots language, must be the publication of the Kist and anthology by Nelson Blackie and the SCCC. I have spoken of the colonial nature of my education, all in schools in Scotland. The next generation will be more fortunate if they are given the chance to savour the contents of the Kist. Alan was involved in the preparation of the DAT Masters for this project, so Scotstoun played a small part in its creation. Now, what about another swatch of Scots, this time in the Doric? that dialect spoken in the northeast with its distinctive sound patterns. Here, Flora Gary reads the poem that gave its title to a book of her poems, Bennygoke, the Hill of the Cuckoo, with the same meaning as pennycook.
Bennygoke, the Hill of the Cuckoo. It was just a skelp of the muckle firth, a skleiter a roch gran. Then grandfather's father broke it in for the header and the fun. Grandfather skleted barn and byre, brought water to the close, but fail dykes then the bare grey face, and a cared road till the moss. But were father suitor to the yard, and keepit him of bees, and keepit fancy dukes and doos at warna muckle ease. He bocht owl, wisn't, horse and kye, and scrimpit muck and seed. Syne, clocheren wi a creichlai host, he dwyned awa indeed. Midders grauwen all and deen, dialt in sma bucket tea, but still she's meester o her work. My work, et meesters me. Och, I'm tired of pleiteren out in end of hens and swine and kye, kernen them of brooky pots and yernen croots and fye. I look far over by Eithenside, to Fyries, Lake, Life lands, to Achterless and Benahee, and the mist blue Grampians. Seer to the holla Bennygoke, and scunner to the firm. Gin I bit dart, I'd flet the common term. It's all to thole on the first spring day, from the black earth lies and clods, and the tuchets wallachen to the plough, and the snaw green rems on the roads. Oh, it's all to thole i' the skull hairst gloam, and the left's a blaze of fire, a stannin' glower, the pale in my hand, on my road out till the byre. But it's worst of a' about Whitsunday, when the nights are quiet and clear, and the flooring currans by the yard, and the green corns of the brier. And the bird that gave this hull its name, yon bird you never see, sets down at the wid by the waterside, and laughs like hen at me. Flet you feel, says the unca bird. There's finer, couthier folk and kindlier country hine awa for the hull of Bennygoke. But my midder's growing all and lean, and likes a rain fireside, to brak her heft to leave the hull. It's bracken mine to bite.
One facet of the Guid Scots tongue which is beginning to exert itself is the vexed question of the spelling of the language. Inasmuch as we have been recording Scots speech for mair nor 22 years, it is for as lang that I have been warsling with the challenge of who to get the sooner the Scots recht skrive it doon. We have given the name of Scotscreeve to our spelling choice, and it is set out in the Tam O'Shanter yellow booklet you should have. At least most of you, I hope, will have one. This represents the thinking of Bill Graham, Frank Bryson and myself, when through 1984 we spent many hours preparing the texts so that we could publish it on Burns Day in 1985. This seeks to help readers get it recht and attempt to prevent the murder which is often inflicted on that great tale at some Burns suppers. The recording of Frank reading this is a precious memento of a man also weel kent in this place. Since compiling this text, we have decided to drop the italics for the OU, but it's I-U. As Tom Fleming stated in his foreword to the Dipper and the Three Wee Deals, A language has to be spoken, read, written, and sung to survive. And so the spelling has to be stabilised and the sound system of the lead safeguarded. It is the demands of reading Scots that come as a shock. We never were taught how to spell Scots, far less read or write it. But things are a-changing. Before we pass to the next part of this programme, let me read you another wee gem from our mother tongue. This is the third verse of the Sermon on Daniel by Barbara Ross McIntosh, whoever she was. North, south, east and west was that sermon esteemed. Deputations that hearkened grew canty and beamed. Folk said that its phrases were richt and sublime, and it aye let them hame for the tatties on time. I' the plate there were few o' that brown copper carl, when that moving discourse cam forth i' the barrel. Just yen or twa kent that the minister's spaniel had chowed up 3 leaves o' the Sermon on Daniel. Yes, Scots is good for a laugh, but the language can cope with serious questions and has been deployed in translation from Latin, German, French, Italian and Chinese. But for my last example of late 20th century Scots, I will turn again to Bill Graham's skill with the language in the form of a novel which he wrote in both Scots and English. It is entitled Scorn, My Inheritance. There is a comma after scorn, which is crucial to the understanding of the psychological trauma inflicted by illegitimacy. Here is a swatch from the first chapter, set out in the format which we are working on in the hope that we can find a publisher which this opus so richly deserves. Some rude things had been said about Tommy on the Lavey Wa, and he is now faced with his adversary, Jimmy Packer. Syne the laddies hog shoot at the quine's back to form a ring o' their ain round Tommy, and he found himself E across a 6-foot barras with a codger he had travelled the length of the playground to challenge. Big Jimmy Packer. He didna like what he saw. Packer was a good half-heed bigger nor himself. His face had a shan-gabbit man-like look. His arms were lang and monkey-like. His lifts were like soup ladles. His father was a fermhorn, and him and his wife had bred young packers like rabbits, ilk-ane dummer nor the yin afore. But Big Jimmy was gone out to the ferm work tay as since he left the skill. Packer took ye gliff at Tommy, then smirk it to his pals in the inmates ring of spectators. They smirk it back. It telled Tommy all he wanted to ken. They were out to get him. This is a remarkable story whose themes range from playground fecht to murder and intrigue. Excellent word pictures describe the several characters involved in his use of Scots vocabulary, and idiom give the quality of the authentic native speaker, which is so precious. And now it is with great pleasure that I call on my supporting speaker, Mrs. Francie Hendrie, who has taught Scots to primary school children in Stirlingshire at the Chalk Face. She will tell you something about Gleg, Scotssoon publication number 1. This was a pioneering publication in which Frances had a hand. She will be telling you something about its place in her teaching schedule, no doubt, and copies of this booklet are available for you to inspect, along with accompanying cassette of its contents. All right, Frances.
Pleasure to be here tonight, because it was through a visit to the Irvine Burns Club that I first became involved with Scots Language Society. Way back in the early 1980s, I was invited through a colleague of my husband's to a dinner in Irvine. So I got myself a bit panicked and thought, oh well, all right, we'll go. It turned out to be a visit to Irvine Burns Club and my supper in the pub next door. So I feel I've come full circle here. Through my association with the Scots Language Society, I became involved with the Glasgow Folk and Traditional Arts Trust, whereby I went to visit schools all over the country. I was a part of a team which sort of covered the 4 disciplines of language, music, instruments and dance, and we became known as the Cultural Commandos because we were parachuted in for a day and then totally withdrawn. It's from this experience, together with teaching in the primary school, that I would like to draw to answer the question, the mother tongue, the day. There is a great revival and interest in Scots language in schools today, due in part to the 5 to 14 English language guidelines which were issued by the Scottish Office Department of Education in 1991. And I quote from it, really. I've left a copy out there for anybody who wants to look at it in greater detail. It says, "The speech of Scottish people is often distinctive. It may display features of pronunciation and intonation which together constitute an accent. It may contain features of dialect such as vocabulary, syntax, idiom, and economies of expression. These reflect the histories of communities and are part of the language children bring to school. The first tasks of schools are therefore to enable pupils to be confident and creative in this language, and to begin to develop the notion of language diversity within which pupils can appreciate the range of accents, dialects, and languages they encounter. This will involve teachers in valuing pupils' spoken language and introducing them to stories, poems, and other texts which use dialect in a positive way. A great fear for teachers has always been the lack of materials and finding time to teach another subject, namely Scots, and lack of experience on their own part in actually using the language. Now, the Burns Federation competition has kept the language in schools, particularly, I would say, in primary, over the last 30 or 40 years. And it should not be entirely new either to pupils or to teachers. I would point out to teachers that there is no real need to find time in the true sense, as Scots can be incorporated into any project, for example, just simply by means of a poem. I've listed poems, stories and songs, word lists, under project headings to show what can be done. The teachers also saw that I had translated the Book of 1,000 Words, which is published by Usborne, from whom permission was given to me to use it in any form that I wanted to do. I also use flashcards like this, where you have the Scots on one side and the English on the other, the way you would do with children in a lower grade of, the infant department. Bearing in mind that the Scots language was not readily available in materials for teaching, the Glasgow branch of the Scots Language Society decided about the mid-80s to take action, and it was then that GLEG was produced. In this book, the main elements for teaching an infant pupil how to read and write in English were put together, but this time in Scots. The elements are a phonics scheme, whereby pupils can learn how to sound out the words for themselves, reading material, poems, songs for learning. And this book is accompanied with a tape, and it can be used at any stage of learning, because I think that at some point in their learning, all pupils will have to go through these stages in order to reach their maximum of comfort and competency in the language. I used GLEG as the basis for my teaching, together with proto books which were published by the Burns Federation, Scots Cape, Scots Kist, Scots Handbook. But unfortunately, these books are no longer in print. And I know there's one has been issued recently, and I'm sorry, I can't give you the name of it, but I believe that it's taking quite a number of poems. Also, A Whale of Rhymes by J.K. Annand, which is also in view there. And most of these poems have actually been recorded by Scots soon. So you have the advantage of the actual script as well as the words. Every school that I went into was given a copy of GLEG to enable them to continue with a programme of Scots. And Gordon Gibson from the Craigie College, he used GLEG in his in-service courses for teachers. Attitudes to Scots has to be changed. It is in the process of being changed right now. But for a long time, the language was regarded either as bad English or slang. And to refute this, I always introduced the children and the staff to the German and French influences and illustrated this by using lists of words from both of these languages, which the words are still in current use. Words such as ken, from kennen in German, to know, kirk, from die Kirche, also kirk, kist, meaning a chest, it's the same in German, and mini, which we've heard the word used tonight already. And from French you get parve, stove, jigget, yes, and even our famous haggis is actually a friend from the French, and the famous one of ashet, everyone knows that comes from assiette. Having done this to establish the validity of the language, I would then do a programme of about 40 minutes where I would teach a poem, read a story, and we would discuss the story, and then teach them a very easy-to-learn song. I'm not a singer, so I used to do a very simple song. And the teachers then could use this material at a later date. I've written out copies and left them out there for you, poems such as The Crocodile, The Puddock, The Coming of the Wee Malkies, and The Sair Finger, but there are obviously lots more. These are poems which turned out to be very popular with the children. The schools I visited were in very different areas, and they ranged from places like Drumchapel to New Lanark, Forth, Carnwath, Gaylord Head, Kilcreggan. And one of the schools in particular stands out, and that was at Garnet Bank in Glasgow, where they already had 11 languages spoken because it was a multicultural school. Not the kind of school you would think they would appreciate the introduction of another language, namely Scots, but it was. It was welcomed both by the children and the teachers. And in fact, some of the teachers had already been teaching Scots poetry for the Bands Federation. Their school song is, "The more we are together, the happier we will be, for your friends and my friends," and so on. They sing this from primary 1 right to primary 7, and they were doing it in all these languages. So we were bowled over and totally impressed by this. It's now sung in an extra language. It's sung in 12 languages because Sheena Wellington, the singer-songwriter who was part of the Cultural Commandos, she gave them the Scots version of it. So now they sing it, and it's really quite intriguing to see these wee ones this height singing all these different languages. A guide to how the mother tongue the day is being accepted by pupils can be seen by their reaction to the Cultural Commandos. You can have a look at things. I've left them on top of the piano for you to have a look at. And earlier on, George had been talking about the Sabbath. I had taken an extract from that. And one of the comments about it was, I like the story because of the way he talks about what he has to wear. These are not very clear from the distance, but you can see them when you come back. He had to wear a brune velvet claith with his yellow shirt. So the children were then asked to draw, and this was their interpretation of what the wee fella had to wear going to the kirk on a Sunday. Now the comment. We got to learn poetry and enjoy ourselves saying poetry in a real Scottish dialect. Learning traditional Scottish poems and songs was a really nice change from what we usually do. It was interesting because we could understand what we were reading. I found the reading a bit hard, but I still got the hang of the poem. I enjoyed the wee Willie Sparrow story. Now the Scottish Council for Curricular Development have produced a pack to which George has already referred called the KIST. Now I haven't seen all of it, but the parts that I have seen, I'm really impressed by it because it contains the songs and stories and poems and so on. George has spoken a little bit about the Scots-Oon, and I think that that's a really good resource for people in school. And I've used lots of bits out of it. As I said already, A Whale o' Rhymes by J.K. Annand, nearly every poem in it has already been recorded. Perhaps you'd like to hear a poem that the children liked. The Coming of the Wee Malkies. No doubt a lot of you already know it. What'll you do when the wee Malkies come? If they drip down after the Washoes dyke and pit the hems on the stair he'd light, and play wee heedies on the clean clothes wa, and blutter your windy in with a baw. Missus, what'll you do? What'll you do when the wee Malkies come if they chuck their if they chap your door and choke your drains and cut the feet for your sapsy wains and tunnel their wilkies through your sheets and tim your ashes out in the streets? Missus, what'll you do? What'll you do when the wee Malkies come if they chuck their screw taps down the pan and stick the heat on the sanitary man? When you hear them come shockling down your lobby chanting, "Wee Malkies, the game's a bogey." Oh, missus, what'll you do? One of our members in the Glasgow branch of the Scots Language Society wrote a reply to that. Must admit it's not as good as the original, but here it is. Reply to the wee Malkies. "Oh, missus, what'll you do?" they say. "What'll I do when the wee Malkies come? I'll wallop their lugs and scalp their bum. I'll bluter their nebs in the clean clothes wa, and gie them a taste to heed the baw. I'll gar them swidder to chap my door when my bristly besom dings their splore. I'll gar their wilkies gang tapsel teary and build them run and run like a peery. If they stick the heat on the sanitary man, oblins, they'll fin he's a judo dan. And when he comes shockling down my lobby chanting, they'll get a shock from my friend the Bobby. The game's a bogey, but no their game. I'll gar them wish they hadna came." I would like to quote a story from Gleg. It's called The Wee Wee Puddock. It was written by Gordon Murray, especially for Gleg. The wee, wee puddock. A wee, wee puddock sat on a stane and grat. Well, it didn't greet like you and me. It was mere o' a creak, creak. And what was he greeting for? The wee, wee puddock was always lame. His mammy and his daddy had ta'en him for a donner, but they took muckle great louts, high no up to the lift. And the wee, wee puddock could only hip-hop. You'll mind, he was just a wee puddock, and his leggies were small. It wasn't long afore the wee puddock had tint his mammy and his daddy. So he set himself down on a stane, opened his moo, stuck it his in, and creaked. Poor wee puddock. He was gey sair made, and twa puddock tears came into his een. It was hard on a wee puddock that couldna loup, and him said dowie. Afore lang, he heard a plop, plop. And when he opened his een, there, sitting on the very same stane, was a big black rat, sizing him up like he was a dinner piece. The poor wee puddock shifted her to the edge of the stane as far as he could win. He gap it and he gollop, but nae creak cam. No, he couldna loup and he couldna creak, and forby he was unco feared. A murky shape flew among the trees and across the face of the moon. Was it a witch maybe taking the air? A bogle on a spree? Jinx, even a wee puddock kent better nor that. It was it. The terror, the grue o' all wee creepy craters late at nicht. And the hullet flapped its wings, soonless and quaint. Without thinking, the wee paddock took a loup and a breens, sign 2, sign 3 or 4 or more, and landed splush in the middle of a pond at the very feet of his own mammy and daddy in a chorus of happy sang. Paddocks were croaking and creaking like daft to see the wee paddock gabbit his wee gab, and he creaked like he would burst. He was sae happy and canty to be hame ains mair. I would like to give you the opportunity of asking questions. I would do my best to answer any questions you might have. I also invite you to have a look, and you can choose anything you wish that's lying there. I have to point out that the stories, most of the stories you will already find in Clegg, but anything you wish to take, other than my textbooks, I would be delighted to have you feel free to do it. And if you want to come and have a chat about anything, please feel free. Thank you very much for listening.